So today, so so today I am going to talk about scientific problem solving. These slides were made by the PhD student Sheldon Huang, Dr. Sheldon Huang. He's a Roger and Jimmy student, but also at we teach it in the PRISM program. We are going to present scientific problem solving from an information theoretical framework. How many people don't know what information theory is and needs me to give them a definition? Okay, so I will ask Google for a definition. But information theory is about how many people don't know what entropy is? So entropy in physics and also in computer science measures randomness. So more random, mm, is kind of not good. Less random, more well distributed, more predictable could be a good thing. At least I'm the kind of person who don't like too much surprise or uncertainty. So information theory is a measuring of information using all about entropy. And all of that is computed with um, information theory is computed with entropy, and there's a lot of different ways of computing entropy. But I really enjoy the topic. Engineers really like the topic. I don't know why we don't teach it more in computer science. Okay, so the process of scientific discovery. So this is what I learned is what your research study will be like. So imagine this is all your human knowledge. And by the time you finish elementary school, you have this much. Then by high school, you have a little more. By bachelor, you have a little bit more. And you might have like a specialization, right? Like some of you might have a data science specialization, like this little bump here, this little pimple. Some of you might have like a AI specialization. Some of you might have a statistics minor or major, things like that. Like I have a CS and CSCNO, so Common Organization Optimization joint honor. So that's like my specialization. So by master's degree, your specialization will get even deeper. So you'll know a little bit more about it. So for your master's, you will know a little bit more. And then if you read all the latest research, it'll take you to the edge of human knowledge. And that's why when you're doing your literature review, I'm asking you to read the latest paper and the latest advancements because I don't, so that you can, get here very quickly. But if we just zoom in on this boundary here, if you push the boundary for a couple of years, one day you might be able to push something a little bit different out there, right? A super tiny little thing is called a PhD. And of course, now you have the PhD, the world looks very different. Now you have this little bump of unique stuff that's your own. And you are making novel contributions to humanity. But if you zoom out, you can realize that your PhD is all the way here, this little bump here, which is a fallacy of a PhD, is that you soon realize that you know a lot about one thing, but you know nothing about the rest of the world. So that is uh, so that is sort of like the idea of, how do you know when you know enough, or how do you know what you know is enough? Okay, so predict and control. So natural sciences is like engineering, computer science, but there's also social sciences like naturalist, interpretist, looking at humanities. Um, I recently just won well, today I just found out I won two grants in SHIRK, which is social science and humanities, which I'm really worried about because I'm really just an engineer and a computer scientist trying to do social science. So this is a book called The Great Influenza because we all survived COVID, and this is the pandemic of the World War One. And it says, when one is on the edge, one cannot know, one can only test. So when you're on this boundary of discovery, you do not know, right? You do not know what the truth, what the knowledge is. You can only test for it. And so that's what we're going to base the information theory on. So testing, hypothesis testing. What are we testing, right? We may have all these hypotheses, these leap of faith, but how do we test? Do we measure it? Do we logically rationalize it? When do we know we've tested enough and need to make a pivot? So the ultimate goal is that given a fixed amount of time, because nobody wants to do a PhD for 10 years. Even though at U of T, some people do that, strongly advise against a 10-year PhD. Try to do it within five, even better, like three or four, like four. But if your supervisor is really picky, you might have to do a PhD for 10 years. Yeah, so you want to maximize your research outcome within a fixed amount of time. And so if you're just jumping around randomly, you cannot tell a fixed story of progress. So you really need to figure out a plan and prioritize. So that's why when all students apply to me, even undergrads, I force you guys to write a proposal. um, it might not, you might write a proposal, you might plan some things, it might not work out. But the key is that you have a plan and you're working towards something. Okay. So, I asked you to make a plan, but some of you and most of you make these like really solid plans that's implementable within 4 months. But if I ask you to make a plan for your PhD for like 5-year chunk of work, how would you prioritize your experiments, right? Which hypothesis, which questions to test? And I think Yiwei, you and Catherine are working on a very challenging problem, right? So
Yeah.
it's and Miriam too. So it's really hard for you to figure and also Divnor. So I think it's very hard to decide what to test, right? Like how do you know what is the most promising stuff to test? So you can prioritize, testing the thing that is the most difficult. But there's a risk in that, right? If you do something very difficult, you might fail. Or you can prioritize the easiest thing, which is like very tempting, right? You do the easy thing, you can win. But, you know, the easy part could be wasted if it doesn't generalize to harder cases or real cases at all. But typically, force you guys to do some toy toy examples. Just start small. You can also prioritize hard questions, like, questions that are like, humanities deep problems. But you might have some dependencies. Like to solve the hard problems, you might have to solve some simpler problems, like in the graph theory, right? You got to solve the easy ones. And it could be time consuming and have lower success rates. You can also prioritize something that's going to be successful, but you don't really know that in advance. But typically, your supervisor, like myself, knows what's easier to publish, and also like more experienced professors or students would know. And research is hard because, it's not concrete things that needs to be done. Like when you go and work in, like a lot of you are working in industry, and those are easy solvable things, right? Like I think the thing I love about being in research is um, one, you're always asking why and you're always solving hard things. But once you solve something, that thing belongs to you. Like no one else can claim what you've done. Like that belongs to you. Like I feel like at work, once you've done something, it's just out there. Like no one attaches their name to it and it's like not yours. But there's really like a satisfaction and ownership to something you solved yourself. Um, so if you write a paper, like that's yours. No one else's. Your name is on it. Yeah. So, course assignments, you just gotta do it, right? Like in a course, maybe like 100 people does a course assignment. It's not uniquely yours. But when you publish a paper where you solve a research problem, that is yours. You get to take ownership and say, I did it. So my toddler just learned to make, he's learning to talk and he could make the sound that sounds like I did it, but it's like do do do. Like so we're like, oh, that sounds like that. Yeah, but if it's so for masters it's a little easier because for masters usually your supervisor will tell you what to do, or if you do like applied research for graduate study it's more feasible. But if you're doing something like really hard theoretical like in pure math or in like algorithmic theory, sometimes some things are impossible to do, or sometimes someone hasn't spent enough. It's like those like Fermat's Law theorem, right? Like it's been a lot of famous people spend a lot of time solving that problem. So sometimes you have to spend a lot of time to make something work. Research hard because of negative results. I think Miriam is and Koze's team is happy to say that they have a lot of negative results, but they're moving toward the positive results, slowing in the positive direction. There is a workshop called NL negative results in NLP, which you're welcome to submit your failing work to, and they'll be very happy to talk to you about it. I think negative results is actually the most when you're doing a PhD is like really scary. When you're doing research, negative, well, like when you're doing things at work too, it's very scary when things don't work. But I think you can always use it as a learning opportunity. When something is not working, that's when you get to have meaningful discussions and do important things. Um, yeah. Um, and my favorite part of going to conferences and publishing paper is actually writing the paper, having a deep argument about it, then showing up at the conference to talk to people about it. And once you talk to someone about it, you actually get insights from all these experts about how to move forward, right? Because when you publish your results and you talk to experts who are sort of around who are all around the edge of your circle, they can actually help you decide how to make this little bump for yourself, right? Like all this red stuff and all the surrounding stuff is talking to people in the field about research, which I think is, if you enjoy, doing something hard, that's great. Okay, so a little bit, some little stories about, Nobel Prize winners and my stories about the great influenza of 1912, is it? 19 the Spanish flu. So there's a magic bullet by Paul Ehrlich who won the Nobel Prize. So he got the idea that you can kill microbes like bacteria, which cause diseases. And so he did this very systematically. He did like 900 compounds. He did every experiment and that failed. And finally, he did find one that worked. And it's a foundation for immunology that won the Nobel Prize. So 900 experiments is a lot, but I can tell you that one of the papers we published has 600 experiments. Like little experiments, like like when you plot. So we did 10 languages, so that's already 600 divided by 10, so that like 60 experiments per language. Like if you do 200 languages, right, that's like 3 experiments per language. So it's combinations of stuff, and then we plot multiple points to plot the scaling law, which was very helpful to the community. So Paul Ehrlich won a Nobel Prize because he believed that at the end of these excuse me 900 experiments he will reach success. But John Enders won because of his disbelief. So everyone believed the polio virus only grows on nervous tissue because it really affects your nervous system. But he didn't believe that and grew it on other tissues. And that led to the polio vaccine and another Nobel Prize. So if Enders' intuition in research science was wrong, his career would have been wasted. Okay, now here is another person, George Sternberg from the Great Influenza. So he did not pursue his discovery of the pneumococcus bacteria. He believed that he did not pursue the discovery that white blood cell devours bacteria. And so, he did not, because he was pursuing yellow fever and he focused on other discoveries. Yeah, so his name would have been known instead of forgotten in history of science if he had pursued white blood cells pursuing bacteria. So here's someone who missed an opportunity. Yeah. So, there's some really famous white men here, which we don't have any right now in our group here, but a lot of famous people who found great discoveries. But, for us, for maybe an undergrad student just starting out, is sometimes it's hard to know, are you on the right track? Or what do you do with negative results? It doesn't mean it'll never work. Like it's the end of the world, it'll never work, or it's just not working yet. And I would encourage you to think that it is not working yet. The early days of my PhD, I would say like I tried something, it looked like it worked, it didn't look like it generalized, everything looked bleak. But I thought I could never graduate on that topic, but I did. So it's pretty shocking how, so I guess what is shocking to me was how little this bump is and how little contribution you need to make to graduate. Um, Not all of us is gonna create, the next neural network or the next reinforcement learning. All we need to do is to make our little bump of contribution. And 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 it's the process of working hard toward that. It is not that it is the process and the pressure of working toward that day after day for a long time. That's the joy of research. Okay, information theory. So I gave a brief introduction to information theory, but let's play a guessing game. So I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 7, and you can ask me a question at a time, and that's yes or no. And how should you ask me questions to reach the minimum number of questions? So what is the number is not allowed, but I'm allowed to give you binary answers of yes and no. Okay, so let's go. I will go alphabetical. So Divnor, ask me a question. So I have a question. So I have a number between 0 and 7.
Okay. Is it an
So
odd number?
is it a yes? It is. Okay, next person. Aaron.
Is it less than or equal to 5?
Less than yes. Someone keep track of the questions, please. Who's next? Who's after E? Um. Miriam. Miriam.
Is it divisible by 3?
No. Next person. I guess we have a bunch of. There's a big gap between E and M. Nazar.
Is it an odd number?
No, someone already asked that. It is an odd number. So ask me a different question, Nazar.
Okay, is it an even number?
Wait, but sorry. I said it is an odd number, but that doesn't really help. Ask me
Yeah,
a different question.
that's help. Because zero is
It is sorry. So someone already asked me, is it an odd number? I say yes. And then Aaron asked me if it's less or equal than 5, and I say yes.
okay. I asked you if it's an even number. If not, then it's 0.
But it is not 0. Sorry, let's keep going. Qifeng?
Is it both? Is it 3?
No, it is not 3. Okay. Who's next? Santi, bunch of S's. Santiago.
I think if it's odd, if it's less or equal than 5, and it's not divisible by 3, those are the questions we've made so far, right?
Yeah.
So it's either, okay, let's say, is it less or equal than 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Sanya.
Is it 1?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so this is information theory. Information theory is using the least number of bits to get to your answer. And it's like this decision tree, binary decision tree here, where you can go down and figure out, what is the least number of answers you need to ask to get to your answer. So you could potentially design your experiments this way. And I feel like some of you have been doing that, right? Some of you have been implicitly doing that without me telling you to do that. But some of you have been doing ablation studies. Some of you have been isolating different parts of the algorithm to ask that question. Yeah, so what to test? So a suggestion is to maximize the information you can gain per unit test. So that's like, okay, so if you've taken information theory, that makes perfect sense. But if you have not, the idea is to prioritize the experiments that will give you the maximum information that's gained. That means experiments that are most likely, so even if the experiments are most likely to fail. So when you first start, who was the first person? I think Divnor asked, is it an even or odd number? So he automatically divided into two sets, right? So that really sort of gave you 50-50 of like whether it was right or wrong. So you don't want to ask, is it 7? Is it 6? Is it 5? Is it 4? So questions like that doesn't maximize the information you gained from the experiment. So we want to maximize the information you gained by doing each experiment so that you can, split the group evenly. So this was like, if you've done decision tree and information gain, like that's sort of like the math behind that. Not very hard math, like engineering math. We call engineering math a third level down of math. It's like math for the geniuses, and there's like computer science math, and then there's like engineering math. Okay, yeah. So the idea is that we do not aim for perfectionism. We iterate and we fail fast, which is like, the technology is sort of like the big tech and like startup philosophy. Perfectionism is the enemy of information gain. Like you just want to test as much as possible. And I know that I shared recently from a podcast and a book about super teams. So there's this, in our lab, at the orientation, we talk about what makes a really strong team and a good team. But recently, there's a new book out called Super Teams. And they say that super teams experiments, they run way more experiments than the mediocre or normal teams. They just do a lot of experiments and they fail really quickly. So, at the end, yes, you can polish, but definitely like try to run experiments to maximize your information. It's okay to fail. I think we want to encourage the opportunity to try new things and not fail, but to learn new things from our negative results. So negative and failure is not a bad word here. It's actually really good words because you are trying something new and you might be trying something scary as well. Yeah, so I just want to find the slides for, yeah. Oops. Yeah, so I just want to share the screenshot on Super Teams for you so that you have that. So recently I also shared a slide on Super Teams, which I didn't realize is very much related with this. Yeah, so this is a psychology Ron Friedman from Harvard Business Review. So Super Teams, what they do, they manage time well, so that there's some focus times, there's some collaborative times. They help make each other better, and they are doing 48% more experiments, so continuous improvements. Okay, yeah, so do lots of these, testings, A/B testings. Build fast, scale fast, iterate fast. Okay. So we can think of like intelligence or, scientific discovery as a compression. Like information science is about information theory is about compression binary bits into zeros and ones and, in least steps as possible. There's other domains of life that you can use information gain, like negotiations, entrepreneurship, or understanding realities and good outcomes. So there are some books that are related. And, your life ultimately could be problem solving and trying to figure out, how to proceed. Okay. All right. So that's information theory. Okay. And then picking projects and getting unstuck. So now I told you about, one way of solving problems and how to solve problems. Now I'm telling you how to pick projects and getting unstuck. So the picking project part, we might be a little late to the game here because all of you already have a project, but you can keep this in mind when you pick your next project at the lab, at the Lee language lab under me, because we always have lots of projects ongoing. Yeah. So how do you generate project ideas? So it could be, actually, I'm asking people to write project proposals for my techs because we're now putting in project proposals for next summer's my tech students. And then we're also putting in project proposals for fall students from University of Toronto. So projects you can generate it by, it could be goal driven, which we are very much publication driven here. It also could be idea driven. You might have this idea. A lot of times students come to me and say that I want to work on chatbots. But I'll be like, well, what is different with your chatbots? Like, is it like elderly focus? Is it, based on a low resource language or based on cultures, African cultures or Indic cultures or ethno cultures? Confusion driven. So one of our project was based on the fact that the world languages database did not work and we were very confused. So now that's really became a really big project. Well, you can mix and match some of the ways of generating. But how do you pick projects to work on? And I think right now in undergrad is okay because you depend on me to pick projects for you very easily. But once you get to PhD and postdoc and higher level, you might want to pick projects on how important it is. So what is the most important problem in your field and why are you not working on it? So maybe I'll just ask each of you to think like, what is an important problem in your field? Okay, so maybe I'll just go through the rest of the people and see. Sanya, what's an important problem in your field?
I would say like barriers, maybe like conserving like different languages.
That's an important one. Thank you. Sean, what is an important problem in your area?
I guess generally speaking, like mechanistic interpretability.
Mm.
I think that's a area a lot of people are really interested in just because of like the societal implications. So there's that.
That's great. Because you're doing really well this term and you're submitting a paper. I just want to say that like a lot of technical terms in the field, but try to come down to the original question as well. Because mechanistic interpretability is something that's defined, right? Or like pluralistic pluralism or pluralistic alignment. Those are things that are defined in your field by certain people. But try to come up with like the fundamental questions and defining things yourself. Because these are terminologies that other people define. And I think you have to take it with a grain of salt because it's based on their perspective. And your belief that their perspective is correct. Okay.
Yeah. I'll be more critical then. Yeah.
Oh, no. I think it's great that you know these research areas. That's good. Yiwei, do you have any additional sort of important problems in your field?
Yes, for our like user simulation, it's important because like if you don't have a good user simulator, then it's very difficult to evaluate the assistant agent. So that's why we're working on that.
Oh, that's great. That's very good. Thank you. Okay. Right. So one dimension, right? Because all of us when we work on our projects, we have these evaluation metrics, different dimensions, metrics that we measure things on. So importance of your problem is one of the dimensions. Difficulty is another one. But you have to do a cost benefit analysis, right? Like how long or how much money is it going to take to do this? And how much benefit the research is going to do. And there's also some risk tolerance of how long that project is going to take. So I know as undergrads, most of you have the risk tolerance for 4 months, which is very short, which is why I force everyone who comes to a lab to have a time horizon of 1 year. Because hard research cannot be done in 4 months. And high quality research is very hard to do without like proper scaffolding over 1 year, which is why a PhD is like multiple years, like 4 or 5 years, because like having really deep attention on what you have to fail a lot and fall into the depths of despair and climb out of it before you can earn your PhD, right? Like you have to be like, nothing is working, I hate my PhD, and then you can get your PhD. Scoopability is, you know, how many people have heard of people getting scooped in research? Oh, nobody. Okay. Being scooped is something that, you know, is sort of like, I'm working on this and then somebody else publish it exactly the same thing at the same time. So at some point, multiple groups were doing like image captioning, which is like image and text for multilingual, multicultural. So it's really funny. Like there's 2 papers that came out with almost exactly the same name with 2 groups of researchers. One is called Cultural VQA, and one is called one's called CVQA, which is Cultural VQA, and one is called Cultural Question Answer Data Captioning. Like almost the same name. One was at a machine learning conference and one was at like a computational linguistics conference. And it's like 2 different data sets, almost exactly the same thing. So that's scoopability. Not even stuck. So in physics, because physics is a really hard field, they like this term called, hold on, let me see if I can lower my hand. Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, so physicist has this phrase, not even wrong. Like it is correct in that it's not wrong, right? Like you cannot prove that it's right, but it is not wrong. So it's double negation. So similarly, not even stuck is like you don't know what to do, but you haven't thought deeply enough about the problem to know what you're stuck on. So it's sort of like you know, you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of times like in the like in project management, I talk about like, you know, sometimes people will be like, oh, this is an easy problem, easy to solve, because they don't know enough about the field. They don't know how hard it is because they don't know enough about it. And it's sort of like the unknown. Like people talk about risk, right? Like risk of what you know, because risk management around the things that you know. But how do you do risk management on the things that you don't know? So those are your unknowns. Yeah, so by doing that, you know, so you really have to take responsibility and ownership of your project and formulate this, you know, your experimental tree, which a lot of you are doing, and really ask questions to come to figure out what number am I thinking? Yeah. Oh yeah, so here it is, right? So here it is, the unknowns, right? So here is so this is data with, so this is there's 2 axes. So this is like, you know, uncertainty and data. So you have data with uncertainty. And so here we have like uncertainty with a lot of data. Oh yeah, so this is the train, yeah. Okay, so there's 2 definitions to uncertainty. So there's certainty on this end and certainty on this end. Okay, so anyway, just to say, you know, there's a lot of risks in doing research and you can manage that risk, which is why I make you guys do a timeline and have a proposal and like think deeply about what you're trying to solve. Because I always firmly believe that by writing things out, by thinking it through, by having discussions with each other and with your team closely, you can dig deeper faster as a team, as a group. Yeah, so some strategies, you can brainstorm, right? Like at the beginning of your proposal, you can brainstorm a bunch of things and throw them out and see what sticks. You know, you can use math to simplify assumptions. I think best papers in ACL and definitely all papers in machine learning. So in ACL and in ML conferences, definitely having mathematical equations is highly desirable. But for sure, you need software, right? There, I know in graph theory, there's one graph theory theorem that's proved by computer. Like they just generate all possible graphs and then check if it was like four colorable. And then they just prove by brute force with a computer. So yeah, so you can do software. There's ideas that you can, zoom in. So do a bunch of toy examples and special cases, smaller data sets. So I think Santiago, you're doing that for your project, right? Like you have, I think when you guys, so when Align Freeze 1 first started, I think 3 years ago when I started my faculty position, they started on like 3 data sets and like 3 very simple, and even like Felix thesis back when he was in France started with small data sets. And they analyze general cases and patterns. And most of the times in iteration 1 of Align Freeze, like the conclusion was like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. We don't know why. But we've moved to iteration 2, iteration 3, we've done more algorithms, we have larger data sets, we tried encoder models as well, like larger models, and we're starting to like zoom out. We started somewhere very small and we start zoom out for more and more. You can also try general versions of the problem. This is usually harder. And sometimes the original problem is relevant. So, this is usually harder. I always hear these horror stories in math where like the PhD student in math end up proving the null space, where they just prove that there's nothing exists in their problem domain, which is always scary after 5 years if you have proven the null space. One great thing is to think adversarially. So as computer scientists, we want to think about the boundary cases, right? Like, how do you know if your software works or your algorithm works? Well, make sure you test the boundary. So in math, you try to find counterexamples of your conjecture of what you're trying to prove. In machine learning or AI, you can give your algorithm some information for free and see if it still works, right? So you can try to give it some examples. Also work defensively. So in software, version control. So make sure, how many people here are using version control? I think so far you guys been very well trained, but never push your code without going through Git. I feel like at work, you're always asked to make sure that you back up your work. Make sure you have unit tests. So this is more like from when I was working. Wait, hold on. Oh, I can't go back. Why can't I go back? I can only go forward. Sorry. Yeah. So, okay, think adversarially. So, in software, you look for really hard edge cases to break your software, or you look for, in your experiment, if you're doing like biological experiment or human design experiments like Aaron and Sonia, you can look for, confounding variables or other explanations. You can see new insights when you put on the adversarial hat, right? Like imagine yourself as reviewer too. And if you fail to come up with counterexamples, you may maybe think about why a particular statement is true. And also you can read about prior work and related literature, which we went through already. You can also, so work defensively, unit tests, reproduce your past results. So I always force everyone coming into a project to reproduce some baseline so that defensively, at least we know your number matches the previous numbers. If your numbers are really off, then like either something's wrong, your code is wrong, the cluster's wrong, something's happening. And always so this is about coding. So keep your core well-tested code separate from your throwaway scripts. So organize your scripts. I'm sorry, I don't teach software engineering, but hopefully you guys know. Keep the configuration of the experiments separate from the core algorithmic theory of the machine learning algorithms, right? Like Like, you will always have these experiments, your ablation studies, your models, your different different experiments. But there's also your core logic, right? Are you doing some sort of dynamic weighting? Like that's your core algorithm. Are you doing like a proxy estimation? Like those are your core logic versus your experiments. And then debugging, figuring out why something that doesn't work. So this, if Miriam was here, I would ask her to present her work or explain her work, but let me go through this, right? So there's many reasons why algorithm doesn't work and you have negative results. So maybe there's a bug, or maybe the information is not useful for the problem, or is captured by other methods, or the approximations you're making is degrading accuracy too much, or your hyperparameters are not configured well, or your method works but you're using the wrong metrics. So this is very, very often that people just measure F1 score or like, I don't know, precision recall. But a lot of times, a lot of the work we work on like mental health or hallucinations, it is not about the F1 score. It is about AI safety, right? Or interpretability, or like there's different metrics. So don't just look at PRF, your performance recall F1 score. What are some important scores that are important to the problem you're solving? That's I find this very important in defining your paper. And then many more that are specific, right? Like if you're doing like for the Hokkien culture language problem, right? Like what are the things we want to measure? Do we want to measure how engaged someone is, or how authentic the culture and the language is? We don't want to just measure the same thing that everyone measures. This is also important when you go to work, right? Like you don't want to just tell your boss, oh, has a we got more hit rate for an advertisement, right? You want to say like, well, we cover more people who have this characteristic, or I don't know, or we try to blanketly cover everyone without causing too much errors. Yeah, so you can brainstorm a lot of possible explanations, or even play the search tree game again, like this decision tree. So, Miriam, I thought now's a good time to ask you to maybe share about how you debug your code, because I think that sort of goes with that. Like, how did you debug your code? Or maybe you want to share screen and share with everyone how you came about your solution.
For sure. So, for context, we were trying to reproduce baseline. So we were using Qwen 3 VL and we were trying to reproduce its results. Um, and our numbers were quite off. Like there was around a 22% gap in accuracy, specifically on languages. For being able to debug, I think some key things that really helped was really going through each and every single file. I think that's definitely more the painful route. But what I would typically do is I would go through the files and flag areas which I thought could be problematic, but then instead, to make it a bit easier, I typically incorporate, like I ask someone else, so my team lead Kosei, if we could look at it together. So that was really helpful because you're more efficient that way rather than you just banging your head against it. So I think one, roping in someone else, just even having like a rubber duck approach where you're speaking out loud to them really helps. I think also being able to use AI intelligently, I think something that helps is when you're working with a problem area that you know well, you can critique it because oftentimes AI will be hesitant to give you something that contradicts what you're saying. But if you know your area well, you can pick up on those inconsistencies and be like, no, I know this is right. Now continue on with whatever narrative you're pushing for. So I think there were two things. One was roping in someone, just being able to have a conversation with them about it, and then two, being able to use AI efficiently.
Do you want to showcase some of the experiments you ran?
Sure. Let me try to pull up.
So yeah, so I think Miriam is a perfect example of negative results and things that doesn't work, but slowly working through it until we find making improvements. each step of the way, which is, when things are not working is very scary, but as you head toward, like, it's really rewarding to see things get better and better. So um, I think let it be encouragement.
I just wanted to share some of the fixes that I found for our use case were really helpful. So one thing that I realized quickly was one, I started realizing that it would be helpful to do logs every time I'm running experiments. That was something I didn't have before. So I started having logs so I could see examples of what the input was, what the output was, and then possibly, if it was possible, this wasn't always possible for my use case, but anything in between the input and the output. And one thing we realized was that we weren't even passing in the entire prompt. Our tokens were being cut off. And so we were doing few shot prompting. So it would pass in the entire examples, but it would actually stop passing in the test prompt that we wanted to get the output on. So that was one fix that really helped. Another was when working with LLMs, each LLM has its own chat template or what it's been fine-tuned on. So specifically with Qwen 3VL, it's heavily instruction tuned. So it expects these user tags. So things like system user assistant, which we weren't passing in. We were just using raw text, so it would complete the prompt rather than actually answer the question because we never specified the assistant role tag to it. Another one was there was a huge inconsistency between our training data and the evaluation data that we were testing on because I was trying to model it after past projects that had been done in the lab, but this was a novel domain. We were trying to incorporate vision into it, so it didn't really make sense to use the same training data that previous projects had used. And then the last fix, which was a bit harder to find, was greedy sampling. So basically, there's two types of sampling that are more common. One is greedy sampling and the other is stochastic sampling. This is basically for any model which will output probabilities. When you do greedy, you just pick the answer that has the highest probability. So in our case, if A has 0.35, B has 0.30, C 0.2, and D 0.15, we'd always pick A. The other is what we were initially doing, which is stochastic, which is you roll a weighted die. So we would pick A 35% of the time. So even if A was correct, even if it got into that answer, it wouldn't pick it 65% of the time. So those were our key fixes that got us back to baseline.
That's great. Which one give you the best results?
The best one, training data. Honestly, it was the training data.
That's great. Okay, great. Okay, I have to go soon, so let me just finish up. So as Mariam mentioned, there's a lot of ways to fix bugs, but also getting help for your mentor. Each of you have a mentor as well as a co-supervisor because everyone has different advice and different perspective on what works and what doesn't work. So, and also like explaining something to someone that actually really helped me during my first couple of years of PhD. I would like corner my friends into like having like I would treat them to dinner and then force them to listen to me telling them about my project. But like just talking it through really helps. And I really love writing the paper and then presenting it. That really helps a lot. But mentor, very important as well. So even people here. So negative results are still publishable and significant. So we have that workshop of negative results, but our we had a Uriel reproducibility paper that really created this entire new area that's very productive and well cited and fruitful for us. Okay, so I think can greatness be planned? Um, you know, um, and uncertainty. Okay, so PhD is hard because it's really hard to deal with uncertainty. So, here's you, right? And here's positive results, which everyone loves. But negative results is actually very important. So, yeah, so, how do you deal with uncertainty and negative results, and how do you know you've tried hard enough? So, remember this information theory. And even when things that doesn't work, it is still an important finding for your community. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thank you, everyone, and